The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, mimicking the storm brewing inside me. For 20 years, Eleanor and I had built a life here, a life I thought was as solid as the ancient stone walls surrounding us. I am Alistair, and until a few weeks ago, I was a contented landscape artist, finding solace and inspiration in the rolling hills and picturesque villages of this idyllic corner of England. Now at 46, I feel like the landscape itself has shifted, leaving me stranded in unfamiliar territory. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Eleanor, a vibrant and dedicated primary school teacher, began working late more frequently. Staff meetings, she'd say, her brow furrowed with what I assumed was professional concern. Id offered to make dinner, leaving her favorite shepherd's pie warming in the oven. A small gesture of support that Id always taken for granted was appreciated. But lately, her thank yous felt perfunctory, her kisses fleeting and distracted. Then came the phone calls. Whispered conversations in the hallway, muffled voices late at night. When Id innocently asked who she was talking to, she'd brush it off with a vague, just a colleague or organizing a school trip. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to, but a nagging unease had begun to settle in my stomach, a cold knot of suspicion that wouldn't unravel. I tried to dismiss it as my own insecurities. After all, Eleanor was beautiful, intelligent, and full of life. I, on the other hand, I was comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. Had I become complacent? Had I stopped trying to be the man she fell in love with all those years ago? One Saturday morning, Eleanor announced she was going into town to meet a friend for coffee. I offered to join her, suggesting we could browse the antique shops together, a favorite pastime of ours. But she quickly declined, her eyes darting away from mine. "It's just a girl's thing," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "You wouldn't be interested." As I watched her drive away, a wave of nausea washed over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I followed her. From a discreet distance, I trailed her car into the heart of Chipping Norton. She parked outside a small, independent coffee shop, the kind with mismatched chairs and quirky artwork on the walls. I parked a block away, my heart pounding in my chest, and waited. After about 10 minutes, a man emerged from the coffee shop and walked towards her car. It was Gareth, the new deputy headmaster at Eleanor's school. I'd met him a few times at school functions, a tall, handsome man with a charming smile and an easy laugh. He was everything I wasn't. They embraced, a hug that lingered a little too long, a little too intimately. Then they got into Eleanor's car and drove away. I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. They drove to a secluded country inn, nestled in a valley a few miles outside of town. I parked on the opposite side of the road, my mind reeling, my stomach churning. I watched as they went inside, their laughter echoing in the still air. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the rain starting to fall again, blurring my vision. I didn't need to see anything more. I knew. The truth, sharp and cruel, had finally pierced through the fog of denial. I drove home, the image of Eleanor and Gareth seared into my brain. I walked into our cottage, the place that had always been my sanctuary, and it felt like a stranger's house. Every object, every photograph, every memory was now tainted, poisoned by her betrayal. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, wandering aimlessly from room to room, trying to make sense of what had happened. How could she do this to me, to us? What had I done to deserve this? Eleanor came home late, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. She walked into the living room, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. "Alistair, darling, you're still up," she said, her voice a little too sweet, a little too innocent. I stared at her, my heart aching with a pain I'd never known before. "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her face paled. "No, no, what about you and Gareth?" I said, the words like shards of glass in my throat. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The guilt was written all over her face. "Alistair, please let me explain," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Explain what?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain how you could betray me. Explain how you could throw away 20 years of our life together for a cheap affair with some jumped-up schoolteacher." "It's not like that," she said, her voice trembling. "It just happened. We connected. I felt alive again, alive," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And what about me, Eleanor? Did you ever stop to think about how this would make me feel? Did you ever consider the pain you would inflict? She started to cry, her tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry, Alistair, she sobbed. I never meant to hurt you, but you did, I said, my voice cold and hard. You broke my heart, Eleanor. You shattered my trust. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you. That night we slept in separate rooms. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the rain still pounding against the windows. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating in a sea of grief and anger. The next morning I made a decision. I couldn't stay there, not in that house, not with her. I needed to escape, to find some way to heal, to rebuild my life. I told Eleanor I was leaving. She begged me to stay, promising to end the affair, to do whatever it took to make things right. But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. And I knew that I could never look at her the same way again. I packed a bag, grabbed my passport and my paints, and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I needed to find a place where I could breathe, where I could start over, where I could finally be free. I ended up in St. Ives, a picturesque coastal town in Cornwall, known for its vibrant art scene and stunning natural beauty. I rented a small studio overlooking the harbor, the sound of the waves a constant, soothing presence. I threw myself into my work, painting furiously, obsessively, pouring all my pain and anger onto the canvas. The colors were dark, brooding, reflecting the turmoil inside me. But slowly, as the weeks turned into months, the colors began to lighten, to brighten. The sea, the sky, the rugged coastline, they all began to seep into my paintings, bringing with them a sense of hope, of renewal. I started to meet people, other artists, gallery owners, locals who welcomed me with open arms. I found a community, a support system that helped me to heal, to move on. One evening, I was having a drink at a local pub when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Brant, an old friend from art school. We'd lost touch after graduation, but we quickly reconnected, reminiscing about old times, laughing at shared memories. Brant was a successful sculptor, her work displayed in galleries all over the world. She was also warm, funny, and incredibly supportive. We started spending more time together, exploring the coastline, visiting art galleries, sharing our hopes and dreams. One day, as we were walking along the beach, Brant turned to me and said, "You know, Alistair, you seem different, happier, more at peace." I smiled. I said. "I've been through a lot, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." "Eleanor was a fool to let you go," Brant said, her eyes filled with sincerity. "You're a talented, kind, and wonderful man. Any woman would be lucky to have you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized that she was right. I was worthy of love, of happiness. And I didn't need Eleanor to validate that. Over the next few months, my relationship with Brant blossomed. We fell in love slowly, gently, and deeply. She understood my pain, my insecurities, and she helped me to overcome them. She showed me what it meant to be truly loved, to be truly cherished. One day, I received a letter from Eleanor. It was a long, rambling apology filled with regret and remorse. She said that she had ended the affair with Gareth, that she realized she had made a terrible mistake, and that she desperately wanted me back. I read the letter, my heart filled with a mixture of sadness and pity. But I knew that it was too late. I had moved on. I had found happiness. And I couldn't go back. I wrote her a short, polite reply, wishing her well and telling her that I had found someone else. I didn't elaborate, I didn't offer any false hope. I simply closed the chapter on our life together. A few weeks later, I received another letter, this time from a solicitor. Eleanor was filing for divorce. I wasn't surprised. I signed the papers without hesitation, eager to finally be free of her. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I didn't ask for anything, I didn't want anything. I just wanted to be done with it. I continued to live in St. Ives, painting, loving, and living my life to the fullest. Brant and I got married a year later, in a small, intimate ceremony overlooking the sea. It was the happiest day of my life. One afternoon, I was browsing through a local newspaper when I saw an article about Gareth. He had been suspended from his job at Eleanor's school, accused of having inappropriate relationships with several students. The article didn't mention Eleanor by name, but I knew that she must be devastated. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it was fleeting. She had made her choices, and she had to live with the consequences. I never saw Eleanor again. I heard through mutual friends that she had moved away, that she was living a quiet, solitary life. I hoped that she found some measure of peace, some way to heal from the pain she had caused. As for me, I am content. I have a loving wife, a successful career, and a beautiful life. I learned a valuable lesson from my experience with Eleanor that betrayal can be devastating, but it doesn't have to define you. You can survive, you can heal, and you can find happiness again. You just have to be willing to let go of the past and embrace the future. Years later, I discovered something truly shocking. It all started when my Aunt Millicent passed away. While sorting through her belongings, I stumbled upon a series of letters tucked away in a dusty old trunk. The letters were addressed to Eleanor, and they were from Gareth. But these weren't love letters. They were blackmail. It turned out that Eleanor's alive feeling wasn't just a simple case of an affair. Gareth had discovered that Eleanor had been subtly embezzling funds from the school's charity account for years. He threatened to expose her unless she continued to provide him with money, and of course, her affections. She was trapped, manipulated into a situation far more complex and sinister than I could have ever imagined. Suddenly, her behavior, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, it all made sense. She wasn't just cheating, she was desperately trying to keep a dark secret buried. My anger softened, replaced by a profound sense of sadness and understanding. I never told Eleanor I knew. What good would it do? She was already living with the consequences of her actions, trapped in a web of her own making. But the revelation changed everything for me. It allowed me to finally let go of the bitterness and resentment that had lingered for so long. My happy ending with Bront became even sweeter, knowing that I had escaped a situation far more treacherous than I had initially realized. I learned that sometimes the greatest betrayals are born not out of passion, but out of desperation and fear. And in the end, I found peace, not just in love, but in understanding.